Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. We'll start off our session with the discussion on the Quranic verse that is being displayed before you. In fact, these are two verses of Surah Ahzab, verses 70 and 71. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu attaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum zunubakum. Believers, fear God and speak the truth. As a result, He will set right for you the consequences of your deeds and forgive your sins. So this is a very basic advice from the Quran, something that we already know from our own nature. So the Quran tells us that as far as universal truths are concerned, as far as basic human values are concerned, the role of the Quran is more of a reminder. It's not that the Quran tells us for the first time what right and wrong are, or whether truthfulness or justice or sympathy or kindness are values which have to be adhered to. All these things are ingrained in human nature. And the Quran has made it clear that when the Almighty created mankind, He had set all these values and all these basic moralities within Him. And as such, His innate guidance or the ingrained guidance which is found in a human being, regardless of what religion he may follow later on, is equally found in all people of the world. So when we talk about truthfulness here in Surah Ahzab, we must remember at the same time that it's not that the Quran is telling us for the first time that we need to speak the truth or we need to speak in a straightforward way. This is something that we already know through our nature. What the Quran does on such occasions is that it reminds us, it makes us realize that this is something that we already know, and at times we are not sticking or adhering to these values that we have in our own selves. So here precisely the same thing has been said, and it is said that believers fear God and speak the truth. As a result, He will set right for you the consequences of your deeds and forgive your sins. So if we speak the truth, of course, there is no guarantee that the truth is going to be rewarding for us, at least in our world, if we judge this according to our worldly barometers. Of course, there could be losses, there could be adverse circumstances being created because of speaking the truth, because, of course, speaking the truth itself is a trial. But the Quran has said one thing, that the Almighty will set right the consequences. So the words which are used are yuslih lakum a'malakum. God will set right the consequences of your deeds. So whatever is done, the result of that would be that it will be in our own favor. And the next very important thing which the Quran has said here is وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ, that the Almighty will forgive our sins for speaking the truth. So to speak the truth is something that is also going to be a guarantor as far as forgiveness of other sins are concerned. So basically, this is the reward that we are going to get. Obviously, this reward is also be something that we will acquire in the hereafter. But in this world, the two things which are mentioned here are that the Almighty will set right the consequences of our deeds. Whatever deeds we do as a result of speaking the truth, they might not fare well on first sight. But ultimately, finally, as regards the consequences, it will be absolutely in our own favor. And even more than that, we know what the Almighty has said, that He will forgive our sins for speaking the truth. So, of course, speaking the truth is a challenge in many cases, but the Almighty has said that this is the challenge that we have to take up. We must rise to the occasion. We must understand that as far as truth is concerned, it is basically God's representative on earth. So if there is truth on one side of the balance, or it tilts the scale of a balance, and on the other side we have to understand that whatever is against it has to be forsaken. And truth is something that has to be not only spoken but abided by. And at the same time, we must also support people who speak the truth. And more than that, if we are to make ourselves habitual in speaking the truth, the best way is to become a seeker of the truth. So if we become seekers of the truth, if we have that quest for the truth, if we have that curiosity in us to find what the truth in us, this creates that importance in us regarding this value, this all important supreme value. And all of us know this very well, that speaking the truth makes us, it puts us in a position that we are, at times we become enviable to other people, because this is the right way to go on. And when we speak the truth, we actually also at the same time become an example for people around us, particularly the younger generation, maybe our own children. And when we suffer as a result of speaking the truth, even then, at that time, we make or we create this example, we inspire people that speaking the truth might bring upon us adverse circumstances, but for the sake of the truth, we have to do what is right. And at the same time, at times we know that speaking the truth puts off our very near relatives against us. For example, our very close people, like our parents, maybe our spouses or our children. They might not like what the consequences of speaking the truth are, because they might not go in our favor in the immediate sense. But it is here that the test lies, that whatever people might think, we have to follow the conscience that we have, and our conscience never lies regarding the truth. There are certain gray areas, but we know that truth is something which is so blatant, it is so, it's as evident as the midday sun. And in that case, whenever we have the choice to make between truth and falsehood, it has to be the choice that we must make, and that choice is to be a truthful person. And in order to be a truthful person, and in order to be a person who disregards anything when it comes his way against speaking the truth, then he is a person who has to have a very strong relationship with God. Because you see, in order to bear those consequences, in order to bear those hardships which result because of speaking the truth, we have to have that relationship with the Almighty, which inspires us, which eggs us on, and which tells us that all this is something which is going to be supremely rewarding in the hereafter. In this world, we might suffer. In this world, we might have to undergo various problems and situations that we might not like. But ultimately, this is something which will augur well for us. And as the Quran has itself said, يَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ, the Almighty would forgive our sins as a result of speaking the truth. Viewers, now let us move on to the next part of our study circle. This is the hadith that we would study, or we study in our sessions. And this particular narrative that we are going to study today is from the Al-Jami' al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. So the words are, and in Nu'man ibn Bashir, قال Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-Muslimuna ka rajulin wahid, in ishtaka aynuhu ishtaka kulluhu, wa in ishtaka ra'suhu ishtaka kulluhu. Nu'man bin Bashir, radhiyallahu anhu, is a very famous companion. He stated that God's Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, said, Muslims are like one body of a person. If the eye aches, the whole body aches. And if the head aches, the whole body aches. This is a beautiful example, a beautiful representation of the fact that as people that live on the globe, as Muslims who inhabit the globe, we are a single unit. And if there is a problem anywhere in the world amongst Muslims, it's not just that those Muslims suffer. It is all of us that must feel that pain. We must feel that suffering. Just as when the eye suffers, it's not the eye itself which pains. The whole body feels that pain. Similarly, when there is a headache, it's not just that part of the head which feels that headache. It's the whole body which feels that headache. So just as a body, whenever the limbs of the body are in a spot of bother, the whole body feels that pain, that suffering. In a very similar way, we Muslims must feel the pain of other people, wherever they are, wherever they inhabit. They might be in a place that we might even not know of. We might just have heard of that place, or maybe not even heard of that place. We might just have knowledge of the place that this and this thing has happened. So this is our duty. In fact, this is something that should go with our feelings, that we should get hurt if something happens to people or Muslims who are living far away. And this can only be done, dear viewers, when we have that thinking that we are a global unity. We as a global unity, as a global polity, we are a single unit. And whenever there is a bother somewhere in this world, anywhere where Muslims are living, it has to be felt by all of us. And the result of that feeling, of course, is that we have to try to do what we can to do any remedy to what the situation is. At times we are not in a position to do anything, For example, if there is an earthquake in a far off land, or maybe there are floods, or maybe some other human calamity strikes, in all such situations, we might not be in a position to offer direct help, but wherever we can, we should be the first responders, wherever it is possible, wherever we can go, wherever our representatives can go, wherever people maybe who have organizations who could reach to far off areas where calamity has struck. If we are not able to go ourselves, we can sponsor people who can go there. We can sponsor organizations who can go and look after people. And this is something which has to be felt from the depth of our heart. We have to understand that at times we physically cannot help other people who live far away, but we can always support their cause. We can raise a voice in their favor. And remember that raising a voice in the court of God is something that we can always do, to put up our hands in His court of justice and to pray for their betterment, and to pray for what we cannot do, but God can do. This is something that we can always do. So not only we should be radical in this area, we should be proactive, we should try to do what we can personally, or maybe by through other means and other organizations. Today in this world, when boundaries have become meaningless, it is very easy to reach out to people who are far away. So through sending money, maybe through sending support, to sending some things that might be needed. It could be clothes, it could be medicines, it could be various things which are needed. We can all have our share in this. And last but not the least, we can always talk to the Almighty. We can always beseech Him to show mercy to people who are calamity stricken. So if they have been struck by a calamity, and of course, if God has made this happen in order to be a test for them, He can also make it go away. And this is our concern for them, that we express before God that, oh God, if people are in a spot of bother, please remove that calamity, or please ward it off from them. So this is how the Prophet has explained it beautifully, that you just cannot ignore the problems of other people simply by dismissing the whole issue by saying that, well, it doesn't belong to me, it doesn't relate to me, I'm not going to be influenced by it. No, this is not the right approach. We as a community, we as a collectivity have to think of each other in all different ways. Next, we move on to the third section of our study circle, and this is a Bible verse that we study. In fact, these are 4 verses that we'll study today, and they relate to forgiveness. And I'm going to read out this passage from the Gospel of Luke before you. This is chapter number 17, verses 3 to 6. Give attention to yourselves. If your brother does wrong, say a sharp word to him. And if he has sorrow for his sin, let him have forgiveness. And if he does you wrong 7 times in a day, and 7 times comes to you and says, I have regret for what I have done, let him have forgiveness. And the 12 said to the Lord, make our faith greater. And the Lord said, if your faith was only as great as a grain of mustard seed, you might say to this tree, be rooted up and planted in the sea, and it would be done. So the 12 here, of course, refers to the 12 disciples of Jesus, and they are talking to Jesus. And even before them, what Jesus tells them is that if people ask for your forgiveness, especially when they feel remorse and regret, when they have done something wrong, they realize that they have done something wrong, if they come to you to ask for forgiveness, forgive them. And not only forgive them, look what He has said. If someone does wrong 7 times and comes to you 7 times and says that I have regret for what I have done, then let him have forgiveness. And this is something which you have to understand, that as human beings, errors come to us naturally. We make mistakes, we commit blunders, but if they are done in a way that we realize our folly, or maybe we have done that mistake out of ignorance, or maybe we have done it because of the fact that we were overcome with emotions, and as soon as we realized, we immediately sought forgiveness from God and apologized to the concerned or the aggrieved party, then this is the right way to offer our apology. But here Jesus is making this point that when people come to you for forgiveness and they realize their mistake, and if they do it several times, forgive them. And we know from other passages of the Bible as well, and from the Quran, and from the understanding of divine scriptures, that to forgive others makes us eligible to God's forgiveness. If we forgive others, of course, God will think upon us with favor. He would forgive us for our sins. And this is a very, very human behavior. It's a very natural human behavior. Yes, there are instances when you just cannot forgive people for the harm they have done, especially when they have no regret, when they have no remorse. So these are exceptions. It's not essential to forgive people all the time, because some people need non-forgiveness or to be unforgiving in order to make them realize. But a very vast majority of people, whenever they commit a mistake or do some wrong, and they realize this and they offer their apologies, then out of our own compassion, we need to forgive such people. And such is the nature of this power of forgiveness, that look what Jesus has said. If you want to have, you have to enhance your faith or to increase your faith. And the Lord said, if your faith was only as great as a grain of sand, if it is a tiny grain of sand, and if you plant, you might say to this tree, be rooted up and planted in the sea, and it would be done. Which actually is a metaphorical explanation. It's an exaggeration. It's a hyperbole, which means that if you do something which is virtually impossible, or you're asked to do something virtually impossible, this is something that you can do, because the power of forgiveness is such that it can change the hearts of people. It can conquer minds. It can literally do things which are absolutely impossible. It can work miracles. So this has been explained in a beautiful way by Jesus, that if your faith was only as great as a grain of mustard seed, you might say to this tree, be rooted up and planted in the sea. Of course, referring to the fact that if you have a strong faith and you have the intention to do what you think is right, then at times things which are impossible, for how can you plant a tree in the sea? It's not virtually possible, but the thing which makes it possible is that determination, that intent, and that sincerity which it has behind it. And when these factors are there, then virtually at times you might do your small bit as best as you can. But the rest of it, or the rest of the gap which remains, is added by the Almighty. And through divine help, we are able to accomplish something about which there was no chance of accomplishing it. So we become worthy of God's help. So we do our part, and the gap is filled by God as a result. And we are able to accomplish something which is profoundly superhuman. And Jesus, in his own style, has often instructed his disciples in this beautiful way. So if you go through the Gospels, you'll find Jesus speaking to them in parables and similes, in such hyperbolic statements, which really induce us, which inspire us, which motivate us. And as such, they have a tremendous potential in making us individuals who really follow the truth and who practice these basic human values. So viewers, now we go to the fourth section, which is a moderated section. We have a discussion on a topic, and the topic today that we are going to discuss is overcoming arrogance. So arrogance, of course, is something which is the opposite of humility. So, people might not be arrogant all the time. People might not be arrogant, so to speak, in the way that they are arrogant all the time. But arrogance at times does overtake us. We are overcome by arrogance sometimes. So in order to always realize that this is an extremely unbecoming attitude, we just cannot act superior, because when we act arrogantly, we behave as if we are superior to other people. And this superiority creates that arrogance in us that has to be accounted for, that must be done away with at all cost. So over to you, Mariam. Please moderate this session, and let's see how we can share our knowledge and how we can come together to give each other various tips to overcome this menace of arrogance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. So my 2 cents here is that, well, first of all, my line of work is a lot of failures before you succeed in doing anything. And sometimes you keep on failing and you have to change your path. So with research, it just keeps you in this humble attitude, because you know you're going to have a lot of failures. But then there are certain lines of work where I feel that it's easier to succeed in, or some people are extremely talented and they seem to get everything working right for them. But it's not possible for a human to be perfect 100% of the time in everything that they do. So here my tip would be to try exploring different either hobbies or other fields and seeing, once you start off with something new and you're like, hey, maybe I'm not doing very well here, it still keeps you humble, and it keeps you in like a very broad perspective of different fields. So you gain more appreciation for other people too. And that in turn
Mhm.
would help keep you not feeling that you're better than others.
Right. So, expressing our appreciation for other people, in short, is something that is like an acknowledgement of the truth, and it also makes us realize that people have various abilities, various potentials, and they have to be lauded and commended for that. And which also accounts for the fact that would not always be thinking of our own skill sets and our own qualities, we would be appreciating other people. So, yes, I think it's a very useful tip that if we start appreciating other people, if we start acknowledging their abilities and qualities, and this comes to my mind, especially people who might be junior to us. For example, if in our office, amongst our colleagues, or in our age group, maybe people who are younger to us, they come to us and say something, and we realize that the boy or the girl, or our office colleague who might be junior to us, he or she has done something for which, I mean, a lot of praise is deserving. So I think that this is what we should do. We should express that praise from our tongues, so that people are able to understand that we always commend things that are commendable. So yes, this is, I think, a very, very useful tip, and we should be very generous in our praise. And in fact, it comes to my mind that we should look for instances to praise people. And I'm not talking about flattery or any false praise, but the praise which every person deserves. So what happens is that at times we do feel this praise or appreciation for our some colleague, or for some friend, or maybe for our children. But the thing that we don't do is we don't express it from our words. So it's not just feeling appreciation for others, it's expressing that appreciation in words before that person, which matters a lot, which is a great boost. I mean, it's like a huge boost that he would get as a result of those encouraging words, and it would cost us nothing actually.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. What the point that you brought up about, saying other people's praises, I found that sometimes when it's really hard to express praise in words, what I do is I buy a gift and then for
Right.
them. And because I have to give it to them now, I have to
Hmm.
praise them and tell them
Right.
why I'm bringing them something. So
Right.
that's another thing.
Hmm. That's a very subtle way. At times you are not able to use words, or maybe you are not very expressive. But as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I think a gift speaks 1,000,000 words, maybe, because you are giving something, and it's like a token of appreciation. So, I mean, if you don't speak much, but you give a gift, or it's like acknowledging the other person's ability, it does go a very far way in doing away with our own arrogance.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Noshad Shafkat, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, a
Right.
very enlightening lecture. I don't think I can comment on the hadith part, which I would want to, but I think to avoid arrogance or to break someone's arrogance, the best way is to go and pray in the mosque 5 times a day, because you stand there with those people whom you consider to be lowly, whom you consider to be not worthy of your attention. And suddenly, when you stand for the namaz and that gentleman comes and stands beside you, I think that will
Hmm.
slightly erase, if not dent, your pride. And you will
Hmm.
know, in the words of Allama Iqbal, whatever he said, sir. So that I
Right.
suggest would be a good method. And it is not just a token that Mariam gives when she gives the gift. I think it's a lottery that she gives somebody when you gift somebody something in appreciation. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, Naushad Saab. Yes, this is a very important point, that standing with each other, standing in line, standing in the same state and situation, shoulder to shoulder with someone, and people who might come across you as different, is again something which really brings you down to earth. And to become unassuming, we have to find all these things. And I dare say, in a country like Pakistan, opportunities to pray in the mosque are virtually non-existent for women. I mean, men have this opportunity to go and offer prayers, and as a result, they are lucky enough to use this suggestion. But this is one thing in which we need to provide equal opportunities to women as well. Our mosques are generally closed for women. It's only maybe at Eid time for Eid prayers, and very exceptionally some mosques do open for Friday prayers for women. But in our subcontinent, the norm is that women generally pray at home, and thus deprive themselves of not only of the spiritual environment that they can gain from the mosque, but also from this beautiful suggestion that you have given.
Thank you. We have a tip in the chat that says that the way the participant likes to stay humble is that they love every human by thinking that they are innocent in one aspect or another. And when you're filled with love for everyone, you can hardly become arrogant.
Right. That is also nice. Another thing that comes to my mind is that if we are able to take the initiative in paying our salutations, our Muslim way of salutation is to say Assalamu alaikum. So if we take the lead in saying Assalamu alaikum, so what happens is that we wait for the other person to begin those salutations. And this is a kind of a catchy situation in which we think, well, that we deserve that salam first. In fact, to do away with this, I think we need to take the initiative, maybe to stick out our hand for a handshake or to say Assalamu alaikum first. And regardless of who the person is, it could be an attendant of yours, it could be someone who serves you in your domestic staff, it could be your children, it could be any person who is junior to you in your own office or in your own workplace. In all such situations, I think one thing that really helps is to take the initiative in paying these salutations. And it also makes you realize that, well, as a person, you are one who has to take this lead. So I find this to be a very, very good antidote to arrogance as well.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Fabia Hassan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
जी उस्ताद मैं उर्दू में कमेंट कर दूं, मेरे लिए आसानी हो जाएगी.
Okay, please go ahead.
जी उस्ताद, मेरी तरफ से दो चीज़ें हैं जो मेरे जहन में आती हैं, इस हवाले से मददगार साबित होती हैं. मैंने खुद पे भी अप्लाई की हैं. एक तो ये कि हम अपने दायरे में चूँकि महदूद होते हैं और हो सकता है हम कोई काम सरअंजाम दे रहे हों, तो हम खुद पसंद मुतकब्बिर होना शुरू हो जाते हैं. जितनी डाइवर्स ओपिनियंस और जितने मुख्तलिफ अहले इल्म और लोगों से हम खुद को रोशनास कराएंगे, उससे हमें वसअत नज़री पैदा होती है कि अच्छा नहीं, बाकी लोग भी काम कर रहे हैं, सिर्फ एक मैं ही नहीं हूँ. तो इससे भी कम होता है तकब्बुर.
Right.
दूसरी जो चीज़ है वो ये कि बजाय हम सारी नॉलेज हासिल कर लेते हैं इधर-उधर से, कुरान से, दूसरे सोर्सेज से कि तकब्बुर नहीं करना चाहिए, लेकिन ऐन मौके पे हम खुद को कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाते. इसकी वजह हमारे जो सबकॉन्शियस है वो उसका गलबा है. यानी हमारा जो नफ्सियाती वजूद है वो इस कदर ताकतवर होता है कि वो हम पे गलबा पा लेता है ऐन मौके पे. और खुद ब खुद ही चीज़ें हमसे हो जाती हैं. ये इतना ताकतवर होता है कि रात को ख्वाब में ड्राइविंग करवा देता है हमसे, हालांकि दिन में हमने कभी ज़िंदगी में ड्राइविंग नहीं सीखी होती. तो इसका गलबा जितना स्ट्रॉन्ग है, उस लिहाज से हमें फिर इक़दाम करना होता है. हमें हमारा जो सबकॉन्शियस है, ये इर्द-गिर्द के वाक़यात और तसव्वुरात इसमें सेव होते चले जा रहे होते हैं और उसके मुताबिक ये ऐन मौके पर रिएक्ट करता है. हमें क्या करना होता है, अपने सबकॉन्शियस को बात करनी होती है. लगता तो यूँ है शुरू में कि जैसे ये हमारी बात नहीं सुन रहा, लेकिन विद द पैसेज ऑफ टाइम ये हमारी बात को रिस्पॉन्ड करता है. अगर हम इससे बात करें कि ये इस तरह रिस्पॉन्ड नहीं करेगा, तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता तब्दीली आना शुरू हो जाती है. फिर भी गलती का इम्कान है. तो जब गलती हो जाएगी, तो जब गलती हुई उस वाक़े के बाद भी आपने इससे बात करनी है कि आज जो हुआ ये गलत हुआ, आइंदा ऐसा कुछ हो तो ये नहीं होना चाहिए. यूं ये करते करते जैसे एनिमल को टेम किया जाता है ना, ये बिल्कुल टेम हो जाता है और कुछ महीनों की कोशिश से आपके तब्दीली आई है। लेकिन फिर भी
Right.
जिसे रहना चाहिए कि
So,
इंसान खता का पुतला है, खता तो होगी।
right. So I think the two important points that you have made are very useful. Right. So I can what I've understood, I can summarize that the first thing that is important is that we must not think that we are the final word in any subject or topic, because when we act in a way that when we give an opinion as if our word is the final word and there's no one else who can counter that, or we have the ultimate knowledge, then this is something which is absolutely against humility. It makes us more arrogant. So we have to check ourselves continuously at however much we might become knowledgeable, there is still a person who is more knowledgeable than us. And the second important thing that you have also rightly suggested is this behavior that we call in psychology as autosuggestion. So autosuggestive behavior is a very, very, I would say, beneficial way to achieve our target. For example, if we have to talk to ourselves, talk to our subconscious self that we have to overcome this handicap. I call this a handicap. So to be an arrogant person or to show arrogance is in fact a weakness. It's a handicap that we suffer from. So as you have said that we must adopt this self-suggestive or this auto-suggestive behavior in which we talk to ourselves, in which we imagine ourselves to be a person in front of us, and we are constantly talking to that person that we have to give up this habit. So it does have has its effects, because when you talk to your own self, it is like an imperceptible shadow that comes over you. It's like an imperceptible thought that envelops you, and when the time comes, you recall whatever you talk to your own self. So this auto-suggestive behavior is very helpful, because when you suggest to yourselves that I will not do this thing whenever the situation arises, and when you are in that situation, you recall that you had made this commitment to yourself, and it does give you that 1 second of opportunity to just back away or to adopt a different path, and it does not become your compulsive or impulsive reaction. So I think that's also a very good suggestion. In fact, both suggestions are good. That expression of knowledge has to be humble in all respects, and suggesting to your own selves that this is something that you have to always take control of. It's not just, confined to arrogance and humility. I think this auto-suggestive behavior, which psychologists have given us as a tool, as a weapon, is something that we can use for other traits, in creating other traits in us, and in getting rid of us from traits that we might not be proud of. So thank you for that, Fabio. That's a very nice suggestion that you have given, both of them.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Before we move on, I'd like to request all the participants to ensure that their speakerphone is off, because that creates some background noise and that could make the participant hard to hear. And we have another tip in the chat that says, the participant says they think one should try to seek candid feedback from others on their behaviors, because sometimes the arrogance is so subtle that you may not even realize that you're showing
Right.
signs of arrogance.
Right, absolutely. So this is also something that we can do, that because of the fact that one does not realize at times that he or she is guilty of arrogance, and it just goes unchecked. So it's very useful, in fact, that you create that confidence. But you see, in order to have that feedback, one thing is a prerequisite, and that is you give the other person who is near you that confidence that if he or she would present an opinion about you, you would not react or you would not feel bad. So this is absolutely something very fabulous that we should do. But in order to have it done, we have to realize that we must inspire confidence in people around us, so that they can really have this courage to come up to us and say what they would like to say.
The participant, who's Adil, he also mentioned that some telltale signs to notice how you react when someone disagrees with you or challenges you, or corrects you or counters you. So then, that should prompt you to go and ask them about your behavior.
Absolutely. This is also something which is a psychological, I would say, suggestion. It's a psychological way out in which you use these telltale signs and you're able to ask that person. So yes, this is something also very, very useful.
Shabana Ansari, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
मैं ये समझती हूँ कि इस टॉपिक के हवाले से कि जैसे मैं खुद एक हाउस वाइफ हूँ, तो जो घर में हमारे सर्वेंट्स होते हैं या हमारी मेड्स होती हैं, अगर हम उनको थैंक यू कहना और उनको सॉरी कहना, अगर मौका ब मौका हम अगर हमसे कोई गलती हो जाती है या हम उनके साथ रूडली कभी पेश आ जाते हैं, तो ये हम अगर कहें तो इससे काफी फर्क पड़ता है। क्योंकि आमतौर पे
राइट।
हम समझते हैं कि बस हम इन्हें पे कर रहे हैं, हमें क्या जरूरत है कि हम इनको थैंक यू करें। तो हालांकि अगर हम करें तो बड़ा इससे फर्क पड़ता है। जाहिर है कि खुद भी
राइट।
इंसान को हम्बल महसूस होता है कि हम जो है वो हम्बल है, और मतलब ये कि खुशी भी महसूस होती है, और वो भी बहुत खुश होते हैं, क्योंकि आमतौर पे उन लोगों के साथ ही लोग ये सलूक नहीं करते हैं और सॉरी भी नहीं
राइट।
कहते अगर
बिल्कुल
कोई गलती हो जाती है हमसे। तो हम
जी।
समझते हैं, क्योंकि हम नहीं समझ रहे होते हैं कि हम एरोगेंस हमारे अंदर है। तो इनसे भी इन दोनों चीजों से भी बड़ा फर्क पड़ता है। और एक और चीज जो जो हमारे पास डिलीवरी सर्विस मैन आते हैं, जो चीजें लेकर आ रहे होते हैं, हमारे पास सख्त गर्मी में आते हैं वो होते हैं। तो अगर हम उनके लिए पहले से जूस की बोतल बना के रखें और उनके हाथ में पकड़ा दें बगैर कुछ उनके पानी, क्योंकि गर्मी इतनी शदीद है आजकल जिसकी कोई इंतहा नहीं है, इतनी धूप में और इतनी
राइट।
गर्मी में। उससे भी मुझे महसूस होता है कि हमें एक तो दिली खुशी भी महसूस होती है कि खुदा की खातिर कर रहे हैं, और वो भी बहुत खुश होते हैं, बड़ी खुशी होती है। तो इसमें एरोगेंस में काफी कमी महसूस होती है मुझे।
I think these are also very, very useful suggestions that you have said, that to be thankful to our domestic staff and to say sorry to them, apologize to them whenever we do some mistake regarding their own upkeep. And this is also something that makes us realize that as human beings, when we make errors, then we have to apologize, and that apology is equally needed, whether the person is your equal or whether he is your superior or whether he is someone or she is someone who belongs to your domestic staff. And this suggestion that you gave, that whenever someone comes to you for delivering products that you might order online, of course there are so many situations that today we find people coming with these online orders, people delivering these packets and packages, so already waiting for them maybe, or offering them a glass of water, or better still to offer them a glass of juice maybe, and make them realize that, well, if they are sweating it out in this sweltering heat, there are people who are concerned about their well-being. This is a very beautiful suggestion, and it not only does away with arrogance, it also creates that soft spot that is needed. You see, mankind and people in general, they are suffering and they are going through so many things in life, especially people who are in this situation that they have to do these menial jobs, and they have to deliver things from one place to another. It's not easy at all. It's the heat, at times is overwhelming. In winters, it's the cold wave that really accounts for it. So it's not easy in any part of the year. So not only to acknowledge them through your generous gesture, but perhaps might even giving them a healthy tip for what they have done to you. They might, I mean, it's not that they legally, it's their right, it's not their legal right, but out of courtesy, out of compassion, out of human considerations, this is something that we should do. And I thank you very much, Shabana Ansari, for this very, very beautiful suggestion that you have given.
Thank you. Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, again, sorry for interrupting again, but the suggestion that you gave about being first with your salutation, I think even if it is the other way around and someone who's not arrogant presents his salutations before the other one even knows about it, it breaks down the arrogance of that person. Maybe not
Right.
once, but you can do it several times. And with regard to
Correct.
the namaz that women can't break, Dr. Sahab, just occurred while listening to you. Couldn't the women today in the subcontinent decide in their neighborhoods to have prayers one day or 1 week in their neighbor's house, and the neighboring ladies who are living close by and who are praying all the time, 5 times a day, they could come there and gather and make a sort of a small jamaat
Yes,
and
of
offer their
course.
prayers.
This is something that can be done, but we also need to be a little cautious here because of security issues. That at times we just don't know I mean, inviting people who are known to us is absolutely fine. It needs space and it needs that commitment, and any lady who can do so is absolutely doing a great service. But at the same time, we have also to be a little cautious, because in our country we find all sorts of thefts and all sorts of burglaries going on, and people who might just walk into your house as a person who would like to pray and then hold up all the people there at gunpoint. That also is a possibility that cannot be ruled out. But yes, the suggestion is of course something which if is taken at the heart of, I mean, the spirit and the essence that you have said, if people can really do so, it's something fabulous. But I think more than that, what they can do is that they should go to their local mosque and ask their Imam Sahab to grant them a place, so that they can at least go for the Friday prayer. And of course, the Eid prayers are offered in congregation, and once in a while the daily prayers also. I think that is more feasible, because there is more space there, and people are more inclined to go to the house of God than to come to maybe a house. That's like a secondary choice. But yes, of course, if in the absence of the mosque, this is something that can be done.
But Dr. Saab, I'm referring only to those neighbors who are known to you, who have been living
Yes,
with you
correct.
for some period of time.
Yes,
You
this
have
can be done.
family relations. And with regard to the suggestion of them going to the imams, sir, some imams are of the view that women should not be allowed,
Right,
as per religion, to pray in
right,
the mosque. So there
right.
would be
Right.
hanging
That
their
is,
heads
I
like
know, that at times becomes a fruitless exercise, it's a futile exercise. But you see, there are situations in which you can go to the mosque committee. And at times, mosques are not just managed by the imam. You have a mosque committee which has more people, which has at times educated people with which you can argue and reason. So, in case there is a chance that you can talk to them, the committee, and you're able to put up your case, I mean, it's a chance that you can always take. Of course, if there is a no, then you can just withdraw.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the participants in the discussion. We'll be moving on to Q&A now. So our first question asks, we believe that every soul shall taste death. It's a verse from Quran. So do the humans during whose life the day of judgment will come, meaning the last generation just before Yom al-Qiyamah, will they die as well? What about other beings such as angels, etc.? Will all of them die too?
So you see, what we are told in the Quran is that people who will be held accountable on the day of judgment, or who would be responsible for the Almighty for their deeds, would die. And to my mind, there are only two fraternities. One is mankind, and the other is jinn kind. So all the jinn and all human beings will, of course, taste that death, and then they'll be resurrected. As far as angels are concerned, because they are not to go through this process of accountability, because they are already working for God as His deputies, and they are deputizing for Him. They are doing their errands for Him. So I thought there is no question of any accountability on their part. So these two fraternities, the jinn kind and mankind, these are the two fraternities that would taste death, and then they shall be made they shall be given life again, and then held accountable for what they did.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, and this is about a tip, asking for a tip from you. So this one says, I have been a student of knowledge on a regular basis for 2 years, but I lack the ability to speak and write briefly and in a manner that's easy to understand. How may I adopt, whichever way I adopt to present my purpose is of great length. So many avoid reading or listening to my content because of this flaw. If you could please give some tips to help out this participant.
You see, first of all, we have to understand that not every person is given all types of abilities. I mean, there are people who can think a lot better than many other people, but they cannot express themselves. And they might not be good speakers, might not be good teachers. But then there are other people who would have one trait and not have the other trait. So first, that we have to understand, that's not that if you're not able to do something, then it is a defect in you. No, it's not that. You might have some other pronounced ability. So you look for your strengths and you discover your strength, you discover your aptitude, and you work on that. But having said that, there are certain areas that you can learn through hard work. For example, if you'd like to have a small knack of writing, one thing which is often suggested is that you start writing a diary or maintain a register, which means that you just write what comes to your mind at the end of the day. So you see, when you're writing something that has happened to you during the day, you don't have to think much, because all that you need to do is recall what had happened in those last 12 hours and just put your thoughts in ink. You just ink your thoughts, so to speak. So this is something that makes you realize that, well, I'm just going to recount or just narrate what has happened to me in brief words. The other thing that can teach you writing is to summarize maybe a book, maybe an article, maybe some writing. Because you see, when you are summarizing something and when you tell yourself that, well, I have to summarize this whole thing in one page, maybe in one paragraph, then you think about the content and you think about what exactly do I need to express. So summarizing to doing some précis writing also helps you in becoming a writer. As far as speaking is concerned, that too can be learned to a slight extent. I mean, people are born speakers, but other than that, to become a speaker who is, just you have a working relationship, you have a working knowledge as far as speaking is concerned, that too can be done, and that can be done by practicing some lines in front of the mirror, maybe by maybe taking into confidence a friend and talking to him or her, and just preparing something by learning it by heart. At times you need to learn something by heart and just express it before someone, or maybe have it recorded on your phone or on your laptop and then hear it back. And in this way, if there is a fear of, the people have fear of crowds, they have fear of speaking in public, that is also overcome, because now you're practicing in front of your phone or maybe your computer or maybe in front of your mirror, and you're not being, you don't need to be extempore or you think on the spot. So at times you can read out a written piece because it's like a practice that you're doing. At times you can just learn it by heart and just record what you're saying, and slowly, as you are able to deliver, the time will come that you'll not be needing to learn things by heart. What will happen is that slowly you'll just read something, make a mental note, and then just describe whatever comes to your mind in your own words. But if you start off by narrating things verbatim, word for word, by learning from heart. So these are some tips that can be useful to you, especially for people who are not born speakers, who are not born writers, that they can, to some extent, inculcate in themselves this prowess of writing and speaking. And I always cite Albert Einstein when he famously remarked once that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, which means that hard work, commitment to your goals, and working in the right direction. You can do anything, even if you have very little ability. So remember, he said that if you have just 1% gift from God, just 1% of inspiration, 1% of that inborn ability, if you polish it and you sweat on it, that 99% is going to really blossom, and that small seed might become a big tree.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for that in-depth answer. We have another question in chat that asks about prayers. So which part are compulsory in Arabic, and how do we know that? Because you've mentioned previously that there are certain parts that should be in Arabic, but you've also mentioned that, for example, in Sajda, you could recite in whatever language you'd like to ask God for anything. But other people say that you have to do the whole prayer in Arabic. So how do we know, why is there this difference in opinion, and how do we know who's right?
Well, you see, what has happened is that when the Almighty or the Prophet himself has said that, well, this is the compulsory part of the prayer. The compulsory part of the prayer is the one that they diligently taught. The Sahaba taught, the Prophet himself taught to his Sahaba, and the Sahaba taught their students that this is the thing that you have to do. And those 5 areas I've always recounted them, just to recount them again. To say Allahu Akbar is one, to say Alhamdulillah is the second one. The third is a surah after Alhamdulillah. The fourth is Sami Allahu liman hamida, and the fifth is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. These are the 5 instances that have to be said in Arabic because they were taught by the Prophet that you have to say them in Arabic. And these are the instances you realize that when you go to a mosque in congregation, these are the instances that you actually speak out aloud. All the rest is said in your own heart. And about all the rest, you'll find that when people question that Prophet, what did you read? He said that I read this, and you can read anything that you like, if it is of the nature of making dua, glorifying the Almighty, or expressing your gratitude. So you see that the question itself makes it clear to us that regarding these 5 things, the Prophet took pains. He made it a point to register in the minds of people that, well, this is the thing that you have to utter in Arabic, come what may. For the rest, when people asked him, he just nonchalantly said that, well, you can say this and you can say that. And when people asked him that what did he do, he said, well, at times I say these words, at times I say these words, and at times I say these words, which itself shows how he himself was given this choice. So I think this is reason enough, this is argument enough for us to understand that there is this leverage that we are given, and this is the beauty of the prayer as well, that it makes us connect to God not only through that universal language of Arabic that we speak, that we have to know at least in the prayer wherever we go in this world, but also that personal connection through some of the other parts in which the Prophet, when he himself said, well, this is how you should do, and he gave those options to people, that we have to understand that this was something that the Prophet has given us as a concession and added more color to the prayer, I would say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question comes from me, actually. So this is and our khatib yesterday. He was talking about the forgiveness of Allah, and he quoted this one hadith that's in Sahih Bukhari, and he's also said that it's in Sahih Muslim, which is about this man from Bani Israel who had killed 99 people, and then he goes to a monk and asks if God is going to forgive him, and the monk says no, so he kills the monk. Then he goes on to a scholar and asks, if God is going to forgive him, and the scholar says, well, of course he will, but this place is bad for you, so you have to do hijrah to like a better place. And so he starts walking to that place, but in the middle of his like when he was walking to that other village, Allah willed for him to die. And so now the angels of mercy and the angels of punishment are both confused, like who's going to take his soul. So then they measure the distance from his body to from the first town that he was coming from, and then his body to where he was going to end up. And Allah shifted the earth in some way to like have him end up closer to the other town. And it just seemed like a crazy story to me, because I'm like, if Allah is going to change the earth or like shift it, that's going to be catastrophic for the planet. So it didn't make much sense to me. You could please explain.
I think you've summed up in your last sentence that it doesn't make sense at all. And remember, these are anecdotes which have absolutely no authenticity. They are cited, unfortunately, by our imams and our our khatibs, and this goes on unchecked. The way that you have described it, I have heard of it before as well. It is absolutely, unreliable. It has no basis. It's just something that is more of a hearsay. Yes, it might be quoted in some of these books as well, but as I said, these books again have a lot of material from the Israeliyat. Israeliyat is a genre in which you have a lot of content from what has been narrated by the people of the book, and it lacks total authenticity. Not only it is unauthentic, I would say, the way it has been narrated, but also it goes against the norms of justice that the Quran spells out. That how can a person be forgiven for killing 99 people without those 99 people forgiving him? And the Quran, on the other hand, says that if you kill a person, man qatala mu'minan muta'ammidan fajaza'uhu jahannam khalidina fiha, which means that a person who intentionally kills a believer, then he has to face eternal damnation of hell, unless of course if he apologizes and the person also forgives him. So I think this is not only, against the Quran, it's against morals, it's against basic human sense regarding justice. And it is best to be you just need to ignore it, I would say.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Saleem. It was like, it was bubbling in my head since yesterday. I was like, how is this possible? So thank you so much for clarifying it. We have more questions in the chat. So this next one asks, I am way too sensitive. I analyze every discussion I have and oftentimes feel guilty for no apparent reason. I believe I contributed to that person's sadness, which led to my eventual depression. What can I do about it?
I think you have to be sincere and a person who follows your conscience, and also if you commit a mistake, offer your apology and make amends. This is how humanly possible it is to live a life. You just cannot appease everyone, you just cannot make happy everyone, especially if you have done something inadvertently. So, of course, if you do something advertently, you deliberately do something wrong, then that is something that has to be checked. And if it causes depression, then it rightly does so. But if you have done you've done your due diligence and you've done your best, if something happens out of it, well, it's how things have been ordained. Because you see, you have done your best, but the other person might not be behaving in the right way. The way he has received what you have said might be absolutely different. So what you say is not just a test for your own self, it's a test for the receiver as well. So in the grand scheme of things, the Almighty has created this web, I would say, in which people become source of trials and tests for other people and for their own selves as well. So for us, that we need to do for us is that we have to follow our conscience, we have to be sincere in our undertakings, and if we realize that we have committed a mistake, that we have to immediately make amends for that. So I think if this three-pronged approach is adopted, we should just not worry about the consequences.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, could you please recommend any book on bid'ah sayyi'ah and bid'ah hasana?
I don't think that there is any book that is to be needed other than the Quran. If you have a good knowledge of the Quran and you're following the Sunnah of the Prophet, which are, the Sunnah that we know that can be counted in our fingers, there are 18 or 19 of them. If you just have recourse to them, our Ustaz Javed Ghamidi has made a list of them in his book Mizan. You can just read through them that these are the sunnahs, and anything which is does not conform to these sunnahs are bid'ahs. That is all that is needed. And of course, the one litmus test is that whenever you feel uncomfortable or whenever a question comes to your mind, just discuss it with some scholar and he'll explain it to you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, people often bend a little while greeting each other out of respect. Is that okay, or is it prohibited and we're only allowed to bend in front of God?
It's perfectly fine. So when you're bending or you're offering courtesy to someone, that is just a show of respect. You're not acknowledging that person to be God or someone superior to you. It's just a way to show respect for the other person, and I think it's perfectly okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Adila, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mariam. I don't have a question. I just have a comment. My internet connection is really bad, so I missed few parts. I have a comment regarding arrogance. I was just thinking as parents, when we're raising kids, हम शुरू से ही उनको इस तरह से ना रेज करें that they turn out to be arrogant. उनको humility, humble होना सिखाएं. And when we admire our kids or appreciate something in them, it could be anything in our brothers or sisters or anyone, our husbands, wives. We shouldn't overdo it, go overboard. We should always adopt a middle path so that they don't go thinking that, oh my God, we are so amazing and such a such thing. So a person can also, as a mother, as a father, can also go a long way in teaching them how to be humble.
Right. So that goes without saying that as parents, we have to pay attention to the upbringing of children. It's not just the case with humility. There are a host of other basic human values that as parents we need to instill in our children, and the best thing would be to lead by example, by exhibiting, by displaying these qualities before them. when they see their own parents around them displaying them. I mean, this is the best inspiration that you can give to them. Yes, these are some of the tips that can be done, but as I said, it's very important that when you are raising children or when you're planning for your children, you must think that, well, to make them good human beings is a responsibility that I mean, that is sometimes overlooked. And it is only when those bad habits become very, very strong in our children that we realize that what has happened. So it has to be a very, very well planned activity. I mean, you rear children, you plan for children, that is fine. But remember that as parents, we are responsible for their moral upkeep, for their education, and giving them proper time, giving them attention, and above all, behaving in a way that we can become an example for them.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions. So inshallah, see you again.